Activision doesn't want you to see this. Specifically, the numbers that I am going to show you in this video today, Activision doesn't want you to see. And no, I'm not talking about the recent numbers where we've seen the giant drop-off of Steam players of Call of Duty, which includes Call of Duty Warzone, Black Ops 6, and a bunch of old games as well. Pretty much everything since they released the Call of Duty HQ. But no, those aren't the numbers that I'm actually talking about. And in fact, there's actually a lot that Activision doesn't want you to see. Whether those are the actual way that skill-based matchmaking works and the numbers that they have behind that, or whether we're talking about the actual downloads, sales, and player numbers, we can in fact see most of these numbers, but they're hidden. But it wasn't always that way. When I first started playing Call of Duty, back in Call of Duty World at War, when you would log into the game, you would see down in the bottom left-hand corner exactly how many players were online. And over the years, as I played more and more Call of Duty, that number slowly increased. I remember logging into Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and seeing down in the bottom left-hand corner over 1 million players being online at a given time. And that was there for quite some time, even introducing other things where you could see kind of like a heat map of where players were actually playing in the world. And in certain games, you could even see in different playlists how many players were playing within a given playlist in that game. But one day, this disappeared. Now, why, you may be asking? There's actually quite a big reason for it. You see, back in Call of Duty Black Ops 2, it was one of the most popular games of all time. The game felt good. They introduced great systems like the Pick 10 system. They had amazing new streaks that we had never seen before. It was a good combination between a Call of Duty game of the past and a Call of Duty game of the future. And on top of that, the gameplay was great. The ranked play was great. Players just wanted to play the game. Whether you're playing multiplayer, zombies, or campaign, everyone was eating good that year. The year after, we got Call of Duty Ghost, which you could actually see a heat map of players, but the player count quickly became much less than Call of Duty Black Ops 2. But they were done developing Black Ops 2. They were done releasing microtransactions. And in fact, they didn't want you playing that older Call of Duty game. But people could see that the player count was higher in Black Ops 2 than it was in Call of Duty Ghosts. So what did they do? They removed that player count from Call of Duty Ghosts altogether. That way you couldn't see how many people were playing. And ever since then, we have not been able to see how many players were playing in a given Call of Duty game. Now, this was until years ago where that player number was reintroduced because of Steam. Call of Duty was added back into Steam. At one point, it was only on Battle.net, then they reintroduced it to Steam, and you can see how many players are playing a given game in Steam. Now, here's the thing. People are freaking out because of that drop of 50% of players, which is a massive deal, don't get me wrong, but keep in mind, most players playing Call of Duty are not on Steam. They're on console, they're on PlayStation, they're on Xbox, so those aren't accounted for in that game. So is this game dead by any means? No. But I truly believe that 50% of those players that have dropped off are probably concurrent with the other consoles as well. 50% off of PlayStation, 50% off of Xbox, 50% off of Steam. 50% is probably 50% everywhere. But yet still, these are not the numbers that I am talking about. You see, there was a lawsuit. There is always a lawsuit, but this lawsuit happened to involve Call of Duty. Now, in said lawsuit, we found out a couple of different numbers about Call of Duty games. Number one, how much it cost to develop them, and number two, how many copies the game sold. Now, this has always been something that was up for debate. Some of these stats just being completely wrong, as we're gonna find out here. You see, this graph that we're looking at here appears as though the number one selling Call of Duty game of all time was Call of Duty Black Ops 1. But throughout this lawsuit, we're gonna find out that these numbers are very, very wrong. Now, what I am talking about here is in said lawsuit, the first game that they talked about was Call of Duty Black Ops 3, which was released in 2015. As we find out, this game cost over $450 million to develop. No, you didn't hear me wrong. But they also told us that it sold over 43 million copies, which, if you do some math, is just over $3 billion in sales, assuming that they all sold for $70. And keep in mind, some of these games actually have prestige editions or things like that that cost more than $70. So yeah, $3 billion just off of sales alone, not counting for microtransactions. And in Black Ops 3, there were supply drops in that game. Now, moving on to what a lot of people assumed was the most popular game of all time, Modern Warfare 2019. Now, the investment into this game actually went up to $640 million. Now, just to paint some pictures here, some things that we have heard recently was with the flop of Concord, it was rumored that that game cost $400 million to produce. Other ones, like The Last of Us Part 2, was actually brought up in this lawsuit as well at $220 million to produce. These numbers were assumed to be astronomical, but we never saw the ones that Call of Duty was putting out. Keep in mind, I don't believe that this development cost includes their marketing, and Call of Duty markets like crazy. We'll come back to that in a minute. But again, with Modern Warfare 2019, it had actually very similar sales numbers to Black Ops 3, with 41 million copies being sold. The last game that we have information on is from 2020, which is Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Now, this one was invested with over $700 million into production. So as you can see, these numbers just keep on going up. And assumably with Black Ops 6, I would be willing to bet that that number is very close, if not over $1 billion. Now, this game dropped substantially from Modern Warfare 2019, dropping down to 30 million copies sold. Just off of those sales alone, you're looking at $2.1 billion in the pocket of Activision, which if you take off the amount that they spend on production, we don't know the marketing cost, they're still making over $1 billion just off of the sales of the game, not including microtransactions. But don't worry, we will get there because we actually know about that as well. But just off of those trends alone, we see the price of producing the game going up and up and up, yet the amount of copies sold dropping substantially. Even from Black Ops 3, an older Call of Duty game, this number keeps going down. So you would think that the amount of money that Activision was making off of Call of Duty would also be going down, and they would be making some big changes to go back to the roots of the game. As it turns out, the amount of copies sold may be going down, but the money they're making is not. So numbers, the numbers that I am getting here are from investor reports. These are for Activision Blizzard. So yes, other games are included like World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, but the trends that we are seeing here are broadly from Call of Duty. Now, the total net revenues for the year of 2020, so in other words, right after Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 was released and into 2021. So in 2020, the net revenue was $8 billion, and in 2021 the net revenue was $8.8 billion. But the weird part is the product sales in these 2 years were almost identical. In fact, in 2021 they were lower than in 2020, which explains the less sales of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War compared to Modern Warfare. But the revenue went up, and that is all because of in-game subscriptions and other revenues, as they are stated in the investor report. In other words, microtransactions. Even though the sales of the game went down, even though there was less players playing, they found a way to make more money off of in-game purchases. And moving into the year 2022, these numbers went down in the year as a whole, but it's almost as if something clicked in the year 2022, because in the last 3 months of 2022, even though the game sales were down, things were not doing well, all of a sudden we see this uptick in in-game subscriptions, bumping their revenue over the year 2021 to $1.6 billion. So when I say in-game subscriptions, this is in-game purchases. And when it comes to these, I truly believe the uptick at the end of 2022 is something we have seen get higher and higher, and you'll see those numbers go up in a second. But I think what this came down to is when they started to do crossover events, where we saw other pop culture references be brought in with various bundles, whether we're looking at Nicki Minaj, Snoop Dogg, or any other that we've seen through these various games. They have gone up to the point where in Modern Warfare 3, we were getting a new one of these almost every single week, and we are once again seeing that with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Hence, those numbers getting higher and higher. The sales may go down, but the in-game purchases go up. Now, after this, we can see the years following looking like this. 2023, the number goes up past the earning revenue of Modern Warfare 2019 to $9.88 billion. And 2024, they broke $10 billion in net revenue. The player numbers are dropping, the sales are dropping, but the revenue keeps going up. That is why when we see these posts like we've seen this year, where they go out and thank the community for the #1 total hours played, for the #1 total players, and the #1 total matches, notice how nowhere in there do they say #1 in sales or the top selling Call of Duty. They're talking about playtime, they're talking about hours. This is all in the way that they're working with their skill-based matchmaking, or more specifically, engagement optimized matchmaking. It is designed for you to stay in the game longer and spend more money. And even though people are dropping off the game, and even though less people are playing, the one thing that is going up is dollars. And therefore, they don't care if less people are playing. They don't care if that number is dropping by 50% a month. However, if the dollar signs start dropping by 50% a month, then we might be seeing a little bit of change. But for now, these have been the numbers that Activision doesn't want you to see.